I want to check in with Markos Moulitsas, founder of the Daily Kos, and a man who has his finger on the pulse of the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. So, Markos, there's an interesting debate that I've already heard have among progressives, which is, and in fact, even among some that are skeptical of Elizabeth Warren, that says Michael Bloomberg is a gift to Elizabeth Warren. What do you think of that analysis?
It's not wrong, I don't think, and it's not just Warren, but also Bernie Sanders.
Explain why. Articulate why that is because plenty of progressives and, frankly, even some of the establishment wing believe this. But explain the rationale.
The rationale is that you have two candidates, and Warren is the leading one of the two right now, who are basically built an entire narrative about the capricious and unearned influence that billionaires have on our economy. And here's somebody, a white male, who just stomps in thinking that he knows better than anybody else. And the only reason we're even talking about him is because he's a billionaire. So he exemplifies the argument about the wealthy having too much influence, and he's going to come in, he's going to spend millions of dollars a day, like you just said, and he's going to once again sort of remind people why a wealth tax is such a good idea. So I don't think he actually has any impact as far as the numbers are concerned. He's not going to get any real support in the polls. I mean, his 20 billionaire buddies aren't going to be enough to give him anything real tangible as far as support is, but he's going to be a great foil to run against when your argument is that the wealthy have too much influence.
All right. I think, does he at all get credit for being an elected official for as long as he has? Because you went for billionaire. To me, there's a difference between Steyer and Bloomberg, right? Where Bloomberg is been an elected official and a billionaire. Steyer, he hadn't really done anything since then. I'm just curious if you at all are concerned about the network of mayors that Bloomberg has put together that could create a formidable national organization.
No, I mean, even the idea that an endorsement means anything these days is kind of is outdated in the era of social media, where everybody's making their own decisions and making their own connections directly with candidates. So who cares who he gets? And now, being a Republican mayor maybe would have been really helpful if he ran in a Republican primary. But the fact is that if he wants to remind people that he wasn't a Democrat when he was an elected official and actually ran against Democrats when he was an elected official, once again, I'm not sure how that helps him in a Democratic primary.
You think that's going to be a pretty effective hit on him, whether it's Biden, Warren, or now, granted, Warren was a Republican privately, I guess, before she got into public life. Have you been at all concerned about that hit on her?
No, I was a Republican back in that era, too. I mean, believe it or not. So people have their own journeys. They come to see the light in their own way. And the fact is that even when she was a Republican, if you read her writings and her public sayings, she was actually pretty left of center already. She was a Massachusetts Republican, which is a very, very different beast than a Washington Republican nowadays.
Let me ask you
by the way,
about...
I was going to say...
Go ahead.
There's no need to hit Bloomberg. I don't think he's going to be relevant in his campaign. He's not going to be in any of the debates. Right. So we're going to talk about him for a week, then we're going to forget, just like we did Schultz.
Fair enough. You forgot his first name, too. I know. Right. I know what you were about to do. You were about to say another name of Schultz, I think, but it's Howard Schultz. We go with the Ed Schultz by accident, too, sometimes. I get that. Former MSNBC or the late Ed Schultz. Let me ask you this about Medicare for All versus Obamacare, the politics of it. Let's set aside, I want to talk about the politics of it. You saw those results in Kentucky. You know this. Protecting Obamacare, advocating for the protection of Obamacare works in every county in this country. Are you at all concerned that Medicare for All hurts the Democratic messaging on health care?
So objectively, Medicare for All absolutely polls worse than Obamacare does. People are afraid of the unknown. But one thing we've learned is that when Democrats show leadership on key issues, that public opinion can shift, just like we did with impeachment. Impeachment wasn't popular until Nancy Pelosi said she was pro-impeachment. Now, there is a debate in this primary that's going to heavily focus on that Medicare for all versus just status quo, protecting what we have now. And that's up to the voters to decide. I'm not going to pretend that Warren has the upper hand here on the numbers, but she has a very coherent argument for it. It actually dovetails very nicely to her entire sort of theory of the case, the reason she's running, and it makes her consistent internally. Now, whether that's going to be powerful enough to help her win the nomination, I guess that's up to the voters to decide.
The voters.
So far though, Bernie and her, who are arguing for the most systemic change in healthcare, combined have pretty much half of the primary support. So it's not maybe a dominant majority issue, but it's definitely a 50-50 issue. So it's a real debate inside our party.
I think that's a fair way to put it. We've seen that even in the in many of the primary poll. Markos Moulitsas, always a pleasure to get your point of view. Thank you for coming on and sharing it with us.
Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.